Hello and welcome to Higher Ed Live. I am your host, Seth Odell, coming to you live as always from Manchester, New Hampshire, here at SNHU at the Mill Yard. Thank you guys for tuning in to tonight's show. We're talking all about responsive design in higher ed. It's a topic that a lot of people are fired up about. Lots going on, lots of conferences, lots of presentations, a lot of things. Well, we got one of the folks that you really want to hear from all about this. It is Notre Dame's Erik Runyon. He's going to be talking all about what Notre Dame's been doing with responsive design. We're going to go through what they've done recently. We're going to talk about the industry, trends, what's going on, what you guys need to know. It's a big subject matter, so I cannot wait to dive into it. But first, as always, let's thank those sponsors that help make Higher Ed Live possible. We are sponsored by the folks over at Integral, the creators of the Schools app on Facebook, a private Facebook community to boost enrollment and retention. Integral just recently launched a killer new cross-platform product called Announcements. If you haven't seen it, check it out. It's pretty cool stuff. These guys are moving, shaking, and making things happen. We're also sponsored by Scavenger, a Google-funded mobile game about going places, doing challenges, and earning points. One professor recently took his students out of the classroom and into the wetlands with Scavenger. Definitely check it out. You're going to want to see what they did. We just sent that out in the back channel. It's definitely a cool project that he worked on. And finally, we are also sponsored by Omni Update, the leading web content management system CMS provider for higher education. The company's web CMS OU campus. It's secure, scalable with great tools and features, deployment flexibility, and an awesome user community. Check out what Quentin Polytechnic did to manage its printed course catalog with OU. It's pretty creative what they did, and it looks pretty great, so hats off to them. Check it out. Link is off to that as well. Woo! I am talking fast. You guys are right. And I'm following the back channel too. So as always, use the hashtag HigherEdLive, and we will definitely bring those questions to the forefront. But without further ado, allow me to please welcome tonight's guest to the show. Erik Runyon is the manager of interactive development and web development. He's a web developer too for the University of Notre Dame. He is a man that makes things happen, and we have a lot to talk to him about today. So Erik, welcome to Higher Ed Live.
Thanks for having me.
I really appreciate you being on the show. I'm really excited to dive into this conversation. Just so folks know, it looks like your image is frozen, but your audio is coming through crystal clear, so we'll just push through, and Skype's going to clear that up for us in just a matter of moments. In fact, it just did. But before we begin the conversation about responsive design, which again is such a hot topic right now, can you just introduce yourself for folks and just tell them a little bit about what you do at Notre Dame?
At Notre Dame, I've been there about 5 years. I manage the development side of our shop, which is myself and 3 other developers. Pretty much responsible for any code that goes out the door.
It's a pretty big task, I have to imagine, for Notre Dame. That sounds like no small feat. We were just talking earlier, they have a similar setup model to SNHU, kind of an agency model. You guys turn out a lot of work. Definitely check out, it's Agency ND, I think there's a website out there with all your portfolio stuff. I was browsing it. I hope you don't mind. So folks out there too, I encourage you to take a look at what you guys are doing. It's kind of cool that you let folks kind of in on the projects coming in and out the door.
While the site is still there.
Yeah.
Our name changed, so we're not Agency ND anymore.
Well, fair enough. Well, guys, get over there fast. Things are changing, so find out quickly. So we're talking all about responsive design. Again, if you're in higher ed and you're into web, you know it. It's been around. It's a hot topic. But just in case folks are watching aren't familiar, what is responsive design?
If you take the definition from Ethan Marcotte, it's flexible grids, flexible media combined with media queries to adapt for the device. And it's taken off in higher ed because it's a way of addressing all the different devices that are coming out without having to build separate sites for each and every device. So for the budget conscious, it works very well.
It definitely is. And one thing, I mean, obviously this is hitting on mobile and more, and mobile's been a hot topic that's been in higher ed forever, and it is a really interesting topic that responsive is getting bigger and bigger now, because it is talking about obviously not just doing web and then doing mobile, and just really looking at something that's kind of a whole cloth solution. And I want to dive into that because as someone like me who isn't hands-on building these things, it's really interesting to see how it works. And I really want to dive in and talk about that, but I really want to talk about what your experience has been with Notre Dame, because you guys launched something just really, really amazing on April 1st. Pretty different, and I'm just going to pull it up on screen. Let's just dive right in. Walk me through the site that you guys launched on April 1st.
Well, going back, this wasn't the first version of nd.edu that was responsive. The site that went live the summer before, so just last summer, was also responsive, but it wasn't built mobile first. It was sort of we were building it adaptive, which is sort of the cousin of responsive design. And then Ethan Marcotte's book came out, and we quickly switched it to responsive just a few days before launch. And so we knew going into this new one that we were absolutely, 1, doing responsive, and 2, that we wanted to build it mobile first. which
tell me a little bit. What does that mean when you say mobile first?
It's going to vary depending on who you ask. For us, it meant looking at the experience from a mobile standpoint, and really thinking about not just the experience, what you're showing, the design, but also like the content and how much you're throwing at the user bandwidth wise. Keeping the download small and fast to provide a good experience for mobile devices. Some of that is handled on the server using what's called RESS, which is responsive design with server-side components. That was, I believe, coined by Luke Wroblewski. And so we do some resource management on the server side. So if you visit on an iPhone, you are going to get a very different experience than if you would on a desktop computer. But another one of the focuses were for us to make sure that we weren't hiding content from mobile users. Everything that you get on that long view homepage on the desktop is available to a mobile user through a single click. So it's a comparable experience, just built for the device it's visiting.
And let's talk about that for a little bit, because one of the big things with mobile that's going on right now definitely is really paring down the content that you offer. So you guys are really looking at how to provide access to the same kind of content. I mean, that's a pretty big step from a lot of what we're seeing currently in higher ed with mobile, which is really just like, let's literally give them the top 5% of what we think is important, and the rest they're going to have to go find a computer to access that.
Right.
So that's a pretty interesting approach. I think and it's a really exciting one. I really, really like that.
Right. For our site, it's not like comparable content. It's the exact same content. The only difference would be that very large feature image that's at the top, and then that wing that slides out when you click View More. That's not available on mobile in that sense, because we didn't think that large visual translated well to mobile devices. So instead, for mobiles, we're using geolocation to say, so further down the page, there's a button for tour locations, which is essentially what the large feature images are. They're highlighted tour locations around campus. So for mobile devices, if you hit tour locations, it'll ask to use your geolocation. If you say no, or if you're off campus, you just get 2 random tour locations with links to more. If you are on campus, it will bring back the 2 that are nearest to your current location and give you directions as to how far, and you can get walking directions, stuff like that. So, I mean, it's not exact experience parity between mobile and desktop. All the content is there, but, we're trying to play to the benefit of the device.
Which is, I mean, I think it definitely works. I know it's been out there and used, like going on iPad or iPhone to the site. It definitely does. And you said it's not exactly identical. There's a few cool ways too that I think are a little different. So, how did you guys approach clicks and swipes and gestures? Because there seemed like there was a couple things that you guys are doing that was pretty interesting in that area. Right.
So the smaller feature image that's at the top on the iPhone, that's swipeable. And then if you're on if you're on an iPad, then that same feature is swipeable, and so is the large image. That was built into the plugin that we used, so that was, a no-brainer to include. As far as swiping goes, that's the only swipe interaction we have on the site.
So, as someone who's kind of a novice in this area of the web world, how much of a difference as far as investment in resources is it to approach a site like this and try to do it responsive? Are we talking about putting in more work, different work? I mean, really, realistically, how does this relate sort of to the ways you would have approached this in the past?
It is definitely going to require more time, both on design and development. The amount of time that it takes to build mobile first and responsive does go down as you do it more and more. We've been doing it for a while now, so coming up on a year doing responsive. So especially with our client projects and the way that we build, it's definitely going a lot faster than it did initially. A lot of people ask about mocking up all the different sizes for a site. We don't. We mocked up the 1200 pixel wide version of nd.edu, and then we did a mobile phone size. And then from there it was just Whiteboard, deciding where things should go, how things should respond. I mean, you don't have to go into Photoshop for everything.
So one other question I have for you then. So walk me through the April 1st site, because you said this wasn't your first responsive effort, but it was definitely, a whole cloth, a really huge approach. How big of an endeavor was this? How much work went into this prior to April 1st? What kind of an investment was it for Notre Dame?
Well, like I said, we changed departments, and so our new boss wanted a new website, as tends to happen. And so he essentially came to us and said that the site that we had up at the time wasn't Notre Dame enough, and we had to translate that. And so he really wanted to have a website that sort of reflected how someone would feel if they came to campus to visit. The visual, the beautiful buildings, the beautiful campus, that's what he was going for. So we pretty much we told all of our clients, since we are an agency model, that, we have this project that we have to work on. We're not going to be able to do any, very much client work. We still had some people that were available to do client work, and they did an amazing job holding the fort down while some of us were working on indy.edu. So we pulled together, content, information architect, writers, our directors, and whatnot. And really, we had 2 months to get done. From go to launch, it was 2 months. So there was a lot of time spent in a small room with a bunch of whiteboards. We covered all of the walls with printouts, drawings, wireframes. And honestly, the majority of that credit goes to our director, Nick Johnson, and designer, Phil Zastrow. I mean, they were the creative geniuses behind this site. Did an amazing job. I was brought in, they'd show me concepts about what they wanted to do, and, I often break Nick's heart by saying, no, that's not a good idea, or it won't work well on mobile, or, that's going to cause too much download time, things like that. But I mean, we just iterated through the process, and in 2 months' time, I mean, obviously near the last 2 weeks, it was a lot of hours to get it done in time, but it was a full-scale, everybody in the room working together to get it done sort of project.
So one of the things I want to talk about too with the site is if you go there now, you see obviously an arrow essentially in the bottom right from a desktop directing you. The page has a lot of content. How would you describe this design? Is it a one-page design? I mean, there's more. You obviously can dig a lot deeper. I mean, the homepage, beyond just being responsive, it offers a lot of content in one place. I'm going to throw up a couple of the screen grabs while you're talking about what was your approach to that, and how do you think that's been working thus far?
Right. We call it a long-form homepage. We had been doing several feature story sites similar to that, where it's we would have a topic and have a bunch of stories related to this main topic, and they'd be really long sites. If you go on the left-hand side, there's a features area, and there's an archive button. You can go back and see some of those. They're still out there. The idea is we wanted to have a rich experience on the homepage, and everything below that large feature image is essentially a top-level subpage. So academics, you can get to it /academics. Same for faith and service. All we did is we took that content and brought it up to the top to make it readily available quickly. If you're on a subpage and you click on academics, you're just going to go to the academics page. You're not going to go back to the homepage. But yeah, we were just trying to sort of create an immersive experience for the people who first hit the homepage.
So folks they're looking to do a responsive project, obviously one issue that I can see being prevalent right off the bat is that if your whole site's not responsive and you're not redesigning everything, how do you address that? I mean, how do you guys address something where you're doing something that's responsive, but then, I mean, potentially I would assume, obviously, someone who's a visitor could click off and get to a site that's not. Is that just inevitable? Is there anything that can be done about that, or is that just kind of coming with the territory as our sites as a whole sort of start to evolve? Yeah,
I mean, it really depends on how the individual college or university is set up. ND.edu is its own contained unit. It's not that many pages. It's easily less than 100. It might be less than 50. I don't know. But that entire site's responsive. We had started doing other sites responsive, and we've been doing mobile-friendly sites for years now. So a lot of our top properties, even if you did jump off to them, it's not going to be as pretty as nd.edu, but it's going to work well on your mobile device. And that's just, we have hundreds and hundreds of websites across Notre Dame. Anywhere you click off to, you're going to get a varying degree of experience depending on what you hit. And we're not in charge of all the sites, so you may end up on a Notre Dame site that we have nothing to do with. And so I mean, you can only control so much, especially with so many web properties. The typical life cycle for sites at Notre Dame are like between 3 and 5 years sometimes. And we weren't doing responsive or mobile friendly 5 years ago. So there's a very good chance someone's going to end up on a site that's not going to look great. And there's, until that cycle comes back around, you have a chance to, redo those sites. There's not much you can do about it other than try to get senior leadership to let you focus on the top properties and get them all, in line.
Well, and then just brings me to my next question, which is when you mentioned senior leadership, obviously Notre Dame might be an exception to the rule. I'm not really sure. Where were they on this approach? I mean, what you guys are doing has been really different. Really, obviously, a big investment of resources, manpower, putting this together. Did you guys have buy-in from the top? Because that's something I hear a lot in higher ed. You go to a conference, people talk about how hard it is to push, new innovative things through. Was that different for you guys?
Are you referring to the responsive approach or to the site redo as a whole?
Let's start with the responsive first. I mean, when that came out over a year ago, was that something that is brought up to people in senior leadership, or is that something that's not even necessarily needs to kind of hit their radar?
No, it's really not. Because the way I look at it is we are, as web developers at the university, we are the experts in the field. We need to make the best decisions we can about how a site should be built. I can't imagine that a lot of people went to senior leadership to start using CSS layouts over table layouts or, any new technology that comes down. I mean, this, in my opinion, responsive design is the next step that we need to be taking to ensure a good experience for our users. So, I mean, it's great to educate everybody on campus, which we've taken that effort to do, especially all the communicators and people who we build sites for. Educate them about what responsive design is, why it's important, why they should be thinking about it. But for when we first got into it, no, we weren't like taking it to any leadership because it was just the next phase of how we should be doing web development. Now with the nd.edu, this one, we did talk to the vice president who essentially mandated the redesign and told him, this is how we build sites, this is what we're looking to do, and he was absolutely fine with it. He's like, great, go ahead. So
so now when you talk about you mentioned educating people about responsive design, I'm just curious on a personal level, how did you begin learning about responsive design yourself, and is this all self-taught? Is there resources out there? Obviously, there's some books out there you can read now hitting the market. Where is this on a technical level as far as for folks that are currently already in web development, kind of picking this up and experimenting and learning with it?
I started playing with adaptive design first, which is similar to responsive, just minus the flexible grids. We were essentially dropping in, major breakpoints for like iPad and, iPhone and portrait or landscape, that sort of thing, and then modifying the design at that point. For us, it was when Ethan Marcotte's responsive web design book came out. And that is a fantastic resource for anybody looking to do responsive, is to read that book. It's a short read. I knocked it out in 2 evenings over the weekend. You follow the RWD Twitter account, which is Ethan Marcotte's responsive web design account. Follow the BD Conf Twitter account. I mean, they're constantly putting out great resources for mobile and responsive. So, I mean, there's a lot of resources out there. But if someone's curious, I'd say definitely start with Ethan's book.
So, let me ask you just a question again for someone who's in the marketing department, aligned with folks here, but not myself. Where do you look at this as far as a business objective? Like, what about the site makes it function better, be more successful, maybe at driving whatever the goals are for this site? Is it the fact that obviously that it just performs better on whatever device someone's on? And I'm thinking about this again from on a personal perspective. This is the way that translating what we can do with the web to business objectives.
Right.
Again, to bring up the latter, is that the selling point for Responsive? Do you think on a business level that it's providing the best experience regardless of the device, especially as we're seeing more and more growth obviously in the mobile space and folks using tablets and phones to visit our sites that want to perhaps apply, get information, and do all the things they do on a traditional site?
Right. It is absolutely about the experience. And honestly, our first adaptive design that we did prior to our responsive work was for our Notre Dame magazine site. Tablets were coming out like crazy. People were all over smartphones, and they wanted their magazine site to look good on all these devices. So we talked to them and showed them what was possible. But if you need, I suppose if you want to call it ammo, go into Google Analytics and pull up screen sizes that visit your site, and there will be hundreds and hundreds of them. And you can't design for each of those individually. You need to create something that is flexible enough to work well on all of them. Mobile's exploding. Tablets are going crazy. Those are a big part of our audience now, and they're only going to grow.
Looking at your experience with responsive design specifically, what kind of tips do you have for folks that are potentially looking to head down this path, or maybe already? Obviously, you guys have been at this for a year. I have to imagine you guys have run into some things, maybe learned a few lessons. What can you share with us from those experiences, just so folks can kind of take that away and maybe try to get at least a head start to catch back up if they haven't kind of driven and dove into this already?
Right. I'd say from the content side, don't hide things from your mobile users. You'll only frustrate them. If you need to, if you're like trying to cut down on vertical space, think about accordions or collapsible content, but don't hide them. Still make it available. When you get into the development side, absolutely build mobile first. It actually makes the development go faster because you can just start. You're essentially just building up and adding media queries and fleshing out the large screen version. We don't even design our mobile size sites anymore. We just, our designer Philip will create I think he's designing a 1200 now, a 1200 width design in Photoshop. We will sit down, we'll look at it, and we'll talk about how it needs to respond. And then essentially you just start building the pieces. Have your screen small, make them look good as you expand. If it starts looking bad, add a media query and keep going. You don't need to spend all that time in Photoshop. And Phil is sort of a hybrid developer designer. He has great CSS chops, and so he's really pushing us to get out of Photoshop altogether and to just start doing all of our designs in browser. And that's going to speed up the process as well.
Wow, that's a whole nother show. You let him know if he wants to come on. That's a whole awesome topic to explore. I'd love to hear more about that. I definitely haven't seen anyone in my work experience doing that before. Question coming in from Rachel says, how does responsive design impact accessibility for people with disabilities? Pros, cons, and obviously anyone in higher ed building a site is concerned about accessibility, access to information. How is it different when you're using responsive design? Is it better, worse? What are your thoughts?
I may be corrected on this, but I don't think there's any difference at all. The accessibility, that's at the code level. That's where you need to start with accessibility. Look at your markup, make sure everything is semantically correct. Add ARIA landmark roles, put skip links at the top to easily get your assistive devices either to the navigation or the content. Meta tags, you need to be looking at the code level on how you can help your assistive device users. I don't think responsive design in and of itself really makes that much of a difference.
It's well, that's a really interesting question. Good response. Good to hear. And I think that definitely makes sense. I want to bring up a side question too, which is looking back at your April 1st launch beyond just responsive design. Obviously, it was a very big change in a lot of ways with what you guys were approaching. we talked about this on Twitter. Some folks might have seen. When I saw this site first, I did not like it at all.
I remember.
Yeah, I really didn't like the site. And now, obviously, I've warmed up to it, like the kind of album you don't want to stop listening to, but I really, really didn't like it. I think the reason I didn't like it is because I am the lowest common denominator user. I'm the guy that wants to go to your site and know right where I can find information. And if the information is not exactly where I think it's going to be, I get frustrated. But the problem with that in higher ed is we kind of become incestuous then, and we all start building our sites the same way. We've all had the same feature image on the homepage,
right.
Obviously with the same navigation for the past, 4 or 5 years now at least, and it doesn't change. And I'm going to admit this publicly because I want to be transparent that I'm that kind of guy that goes, where is things? This is different, this is new, I don't like it.
Right.
Even though that's the kind of stuff that we need. Talk to me about that. You guys had to expect, the people like me to really annoy you with those, I don't like this, it's too new and different and awesome. How did you guys go into that with design? How did you think about that? Were you prepared, and what has the response been?
Right. We went into the project. I can remember when we first kicked it off, our creative director, Nick Johnson, he said right off the bat, I do not want to look at other higher ed websites. He did not want to draw any inspiration from any other higher ed site out there. He wanted to completely go crazy and do something that hasn't been done before in higher ed. That was a definite aim for the project. Phil, he really wanted to trim down the navigation. We had a lot more navigation originally, and now we tried to focus on those 4 main navigation items in the gold bar. The items above it, for the most part, take you off site. Those aren't even on-site links. So there was a lot of attention paid to trying to be as original as possible and really cleaning up the IA and content and navigation. And we have an information architect on staff. Kate Russell does a fantastic job of looking through sites and doing all of the card sorting and figuring out where everything should live. She did a lot of work on that. And I was about to make a point. I can't remember what it was.
No, so tell me about the results. You do all this work, and then you put it out there, and it's beautiful, and it's functional, and it's great, and then people like me say, I don't like it because it's not what I'm used to.
Right, and actually the point I would want to make for that, for one, we can say you're not our target audience. Other higher ed universities are not our target audience. We're looking at undergrads, alumni, the Notre Dame community is who we're trying to talk to. Whoever they may be, the entire university ecosystem there for Notre Dame. But this was my 3rd major redo of ND.edu since I've been to Notre Dame. And for both of the versions before this, we were inundated with emails and comments and feedback from the Notre Dame community as a whole. And each time the response was, I hate it, put it back. It's not Notre Dame enough. It was always had a ton of negative feedback every time. And with this new site, it was absolutely nothing but positive. I don't remember seeing a single negative comment from anyone internal to Notre Dame, anyone from our student staff. Everybody loved it, and they still do. So to me, that's more important than making other web developers happy or higher ed as a whole. We had our target audience, and we think they all love it. So in my opinion, that's a home run.
Absolutely, and it's a very, very fair point. Just curious, do you do testing like this when you're going through this, or do you just kind of build what you think is best and not try to get judged by ruled by committees of random people in a room with a false mirror?
Right. We've gotten this question a number of times, and we do testing. But for this version of ND.edu, we did not. We used the best judgment we had. We had people that had a say in the site as far as what the content should be, but we didn't actually do any user testing. We just used, what we thought was the best techniques available to us from years of experience to build what we thought was the best site we could. Now, if we would have had time and not been on such a short timeline, we probably would have done some user testing. It was one of those things that got cut, and it's an unfortunate thing, but it did get cut.
So, what were your thoughts, by the way, on the response to all of this? I mean, this was a huge buzz in higher ed in general. You guys got a fair amount of media coverage. You're one of the first to the party as far as a site like this, beyond just being responsive, but making this many dramatic changes. What is the thoughts been? I mean, obviously the coverage has seemed really positive. It's got to be nice to put something out there and get that level of attention. You said not just from your community, but from the broader community as well.
Yeah, I mean, the response has been fantastic. It's great to go to conferences and see presentations where people are talking about responsive or mobile and having our site in one of the slides. It's a great feeling. It's very validating in knowing that the work that we're doing is making a difference even outside of the Notre Dame community. We're educators. We love that we're able to do that. It's been great.
So that's the next question. So you're going to conferences, you're seeing people talking about responsive design. I mean, I literally, you can't log on to Twitter these days without seeing tweets about it. It is really like the subject, it seems, that's been happening right now. Where do you see it going? What are your predictions? Where do you see, if there's so many conversations going on at conferences, are folks taking this back to their own campuses? Are they advocating for this? Are they making this happen? Is this just the very beginning of a big tidal wave of change in the way we approach web design in higher ed? Right.
It's definitely the very beginning still. We are far from being experts at responsive design yet, and honestly, that I see the next step is really being responsible with how we build responsive sites, because we're still all in this desktop, high-speed internet mentality, and we need to step back and really think about, if we're approaching responsive design with the idea of creating a nice experience for our mobile visitors, we need to keep those devices limitations in mind and not create a 5 megabyte website. Now, granted, our website on a desktop is, depending on which image loads at the top, it's right around 2.3 megabytes, which is, it's large. It makes me a little sad that our website's that heavy, but if you visit it on a mobile phone, it's less than 500K. We made decisions going in on how to make the mobile experience work, and that's where higher ed really needs to focus, and responsive web design as a whole. REST is one of the tools that we can use to accomplish that, which is using server side to make smart decisions about who's visiting the site and what resources we give them and how much. Responsive web design developers really need to keep that in mind as they're building, and the designers as well. When you're designing, don't think that you can throw the kitchen sink at people on all the different devices, because it just won't work.
So when we're talking more about higher ed, obviously making this transition, we have to admit that sometimes our industry can be a little slow to adapt, obviously. And that happens. So we're still seeing a lot of talk just about mobile even right now. People still having those conversations that we've had several years ago about even just native versus app, what we're doing with mobile.
Right.
Just to put it on the record, in case anybody's still wondering, if they're at their institution and they're like, oh, we need a mobile site. What is your reasoning that no, it's not about having a mobile site and a website? What is what is the argument that no, it has to be responsive design? Just to reiterate that to them, because I have to imagine those conversations are still unfortunately happening at a lot of different places.
It doesn't have to be mobile. It doesn't have to be responsive. It just has to be a good experience. We were redirecting nd.edu to our m.dot website, m.nd.edu, and we took that automatic redirect off probably 2 months ago, shortly after we launched the new one, because our new responsive site was small enough and fast enough we felt comfortable not redirecting people to a mobile-specific website. We still provide easy access to those tools. So if you're on a mobile phone and you come into nd.edu, you have a button called Mobile, and that will bring up all of the same resources you used to be redirected to. And with just a couple clicks, you can get to them very easily. And I don't see the mobile portals going away quite yet. I wrote a ranty blog post about it not too long ago, but it's like, we have all these nice tools utilities, if you will, that we've built up over the years for mobile. And we need to start looking at how we can take those and maybe bring those back into the fold of the main website and let everybody get access to these nice utilities and tools, and not just it's not just for mobile anymore. Let's make it a nice experience for everybody. Be device agnostic and just get the data out there. People want the content, let them get to it.
So my next question for you is being that this is more site generalized than just responsive. It's been out since April 1st. What kind of analytics are you guys looking at? I have to imagine when it comes out, you having to redesign, people flood to it either way, so that you're going to see a traffic spike. How do you even make sense of that kind of a spike? And then where are you guys now? You've just hit basically your 3-month mark, just about finishing 3 months. How does that kind of change the numbers you're tracking? How do you make sense of it? How do you walk away kind of knowing, is there information in that data that can kind of help you see, are users staying longer? How are they using it differently? Things like that.
Yeah, I mean, with a site as trafficked as nd.edu is, it's hard to see a shift, because I mean our site previously was already responsive in a way, just not mobile first responsive. So I mean it was already responsive for a year. So I there wasn't a whole lot going on with analytics at that stage. So I mean the most interesting stats are probably looking back at our MDOT site after we took off the redirects. That's much more interesting than what we've been seeing going on nd.edu, such as, a lot of the mobile traffic that was going to MDOT were jumping back to the main site because that's what they wanted. So now we're seeing people who are intentionally going to the mobile site. They're spending a lot more time there. They're doing a lot more transactional things. The bounce rate is crazy different. So, I mean, people are definitely still using those mobile tools. The traffic to MDOT has actually only dropped in half since we took the redirect off. So, I mean, a lot of people are trained to use that site, and they will jump right to it from nd.edu. But, yeah, it's been very difficult to actually track differences with traffic on the main site just because it has been responsive, and it's a very highly trafficked site. So
you mentioned earlier while you guys were concepting the site that you made a point, obviously, not to look at other higher ed sites, which I think is why you came out with such an interesting looking site, really powerful one. When it comes to responsive design specifically, is there any other industries or any other sites or anything else that you're seeing where folks are utilizing this in a really strong way? Obviously, we don't have a ton of examples yet in higher ed. That's probably going to change, but is there anything else out there that's been an inspiration to you guys on any level? Really just anything that's kind of pushed you guys in that direction to keep going farther?
I was popping out to the media queries site and looking at work there once in a while just to see how people were approaching the code side. I wasn't looking too much at the designs themselves. I was curious how people were approaching the code. And if you want to know how, I've been keeping a list of higher ed responsive web design homepages that are out there. I can send you a link for that. It's out on my blog, but there's not that many yet. It's still less than 20 as far as home pages. And I'm not keeping track of like department pages and things like that, because that way the list would get blown out too quickly doing it that way.
Well, may I make a suggestion? I think you should certainly start a blog called Responsive in Higher Ed and give Dave Olson a run for his money. We'll see. Maybe not. Listen, I have a question for you. Michael Feenan joined in the back channel saying he thinks that less than 5% of universities are equipped to truly handle responsive web design. What do you think? Do you think that higher ed is equipped? Do you think they can actually make this happen?
I can't say I know how most universities are set up. I mean, we have a small shop. Like I said, it's just me and a Rails developer, another front-end developer, and our support developer as far as, coders go. So I mean, it's not a lot, and I know there's some universities where the entire web department is one person. That is a definite challenge. But I'm sure that other universities that might be working with vendors, I guarantee the vendors are going to be getting into responsive if they aren't already, and will be able to offer those services for those that need it.
Mm-hmm. So on a technical level, is there any other advice or tips you can give just for the more technical savvy folks watching the show? Anything that would be up here over my head, but something that you've been through, or maybe they should keep in mind?
Definitely look at what you're throwing down the pipeline. Bring up Firebug or Chrome Developer Tools or whatever you happen to use, and look at the timeline. See what's taking a long time. If you need to, lazy load content. Like on nd.edu, we have that large feature image. There are 7 of them, I believe, and they're all well over a megabyte in size. And if we loaded every single one of those when a visitor hit the site, even if they were never going to switch those images, they'd download all of them, and that would be terrible for the user experience. So we've added analytics, and so initially we were loading the primary image and then one to each side. So that way, if someone decided to click left or click right, the image would immediately be there, and then as soon as they interacted, we'd load in the rest of the images. So it's like load in content as users need them. But we have also been tracking how people interact with that feature, and we found out that over the past month, it's about 10,000 people have clicked to switch to the image on the right, and only about 1,000 have clicked to switch to the image on the left. So in light of that, I stopped loading the image on the left, which cuts down another megabyte plus worth of download for desktop users.
Wow.
Anything that's more extra content that doesn't necessarily have to be there for someone who's just popping in and trying to get to the academics page, look at how you can delay the loading of that. Load it in with JavaScript or something like that, just to lighten the load of the page. And that's especially important when you're dealing with the mobile devices.
Great. Well, listen, Erik, first of all, I really appreciate your time talking about this. It's been really interesting for me, again, someone who's kind of running parallel to this kind of a conversation, who's not, hands-on with it, to be able to see how it impacts my world as a marketer, impacts the rest of our industry. It's obviously expanding. It's been something that, again, I admit, site in general, not just responsive, I had a very difficult time with Notre Dame first. I'll come out publicly and say, as you knew right then, I'm sure, I was totally wrong. I love experiencing.
I think I faved your tweet.
I'm sure you did. But you can definitely show it up at the next conference, so I could buy you a beer or something. Because it's but I'm net user. I'm the lowest common denominator, and I love the fact that you said though that that you're not going to cater to you're catering to your community and your audience and who you need to work with, which is the folks at the Notre Dame community, Notre Dame prospects, and I'm not that. And the fact that you're getting really positive feedback from that's important. But I still think, I hope people that watch this just in general know that it was still a bold thing to do, that people need to at least recognize that, appreciate it, and kind of learn from it, because we need that kind of stuff. Because again, I really do believe with this kind of stuff in higher ed, we're not going to innovate if we just keep replicating each other. And And I'm happy to see that the homepage feature story die. Even at UCLA, we saw like 1% at most clicking through to those featured stories. It was insane.
Ours was very low as well.
And yet we gave up all this real estate to the stories that nobody really wanted.
Yeah.
And we kept doing it no matter what. And I'm really excited to see that feature start to slowly fade away, hopefully.
That was part of the reason we were looking at the analytics of how many people were clicking through on those feature stories, and it was abysmally low.
Yeah.
So we did not feel bad about getting rid of it.
Well, I still appreciated it, because that's the one thing else when I saw that too. I was like, thank you. That was, and it's not that, because it's not just the images; it's the fact that there's resources to create those stories. I mean, you put a feature story up, and then you have a writer, and then you get a photographer, and and all of a sudden you're spending all this money, either with freelancers or staff and time, and you're putting it up, and people aren't interacting with it, and yet they keep doing it.
It's kind of depressing.
It is. It's a really weird. It's this weird little money pit in higher ed. It's like, imagine if just every higher ed institution just stopped putting all these resources into writing these featured stories that would just sit on the homepage. Maybe we wouldn't be in such a bad spot after all.
Right. Focus on improving your site and its responsiveness.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree more. So with that, what's your final send-off, final piece of advice for folks watching before we wrap this episode of Higher Ed Live up?
Find out what's unique about your university and just go for it. Don't worry about what other universities are doing, and absolutely build not just responsive, but responsibly. Don't penalize your mobile users just because you want to do something crazy for desktop.
Totally, and that's what's going on in the back channel with Michael Stoner saying, I think it was responsive or responsive responsibly. One other way, he was they coined some term back there, which I think is I'm all about. I think it sums it up well. I
gave a talk at Pittsburgh just a couple weeks ago called Developing a University Website with RWD, and in parentheses it's Responsible Web Development.
Love it. I love that, and I think if anything else, that's a perfect way to wrap up this conversation. That's a great point. So, listen, Erik, thank you again so much for coming on the show today to talk all about this. I know that folks watching appreciate it, and I definitely do as well.
Well, thank you very much for having me.
Hey, anytime. By the way, I'm happy we finally got you on as well, so we'll have to get you on again. This is not the first, but not the last, I am sure. So again, thanks to Eric. Thank you guys for watching. This again is Higher Ed Live, coming to you as always from Southern New Hampshire University here in Manchester, New Hampshire. I'm at the Mill Yard here in Manchester. If you're by, someone tweeted me today. They drove by. If you see the SNHU sign, pull over, stop by, say hello, give you guys a tour. Would love to see you. And again, thank you for watching Higher Ed Live. As always, archived episodes up at higheredlive.com. We are off next week because, well, it's 4th of July, but after that, well, I am going to be in Chicago with the host of Admissions Live, Ashley Hennigan, for SIM. We're going to be live streaming 2 talks, a Teens Talk Live and a Parents Talk Live, which is panel discussions with college-bound teens and their parents, all about what their thoughts were on the marketing materials we all sent them when they were in the college hunt. Well, they're not in the college hunt anymore. They're going to spill the beans live on Higher Ed Live on that Tuesday, Wednesday, 2 weeks from now. We'll also have an Admissions Live panel that will be in person. Lots of stuff going on. As always, you can track that at higheredlive.com. Thank you guys. Have a great and fantastic evening.